Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for December 5th, 2024. I'd like to invite you to take a little trip with me today to ancient Greece to take a lesson from the great tragedian Aeschylus on the question of justice. Justice over vengeance. Aeschylus wrote the Oresteian Trilogy in the middle of the 5th century BC. And the idea was to provide the citizens of Athens with an understanding of where justice comes from, and importantly, how to break the cycle of revenge and violence. The three plays, are about murders committed by family members of the house of Atreus at the time of the Trojan War. And they're a brilliant example of how classical tragedy provides a higher approach than mere pedagogy, but actually inspires a level of thinking over and above simple linear thinking. And that's the whole point of a great genius like Aeschylus. The story is about justice, and you have this family, the family of Orestes, which is torn apart by vengeance. His mother, Clytemnestra, kills his father, Agamemnon, who's the king and the head of the house of Atreus. And Orestes was pushed by the god Apollo to then avenge his father by killing his mother, which he does. Now, she had killed Agamemnon out of anger and to revenge the death of her daughter Iphigenia, who was sacrificed by Agamemnon in order to achieve a safe passage to the Trojan Wars. So you can see it's one generation to the next generation of vengeance and violence. So where's justice? Where does justice come into this story? Well, after Orestes commits this murder, he's besieged by the Furies. And the Furies are the goddesses of vengeance, and they are sent by the gods to pursue and punish those who swear false oaths or those who betray sacred laws. And in their swarming and biting and everything else they do, they're torturing Orestes, and they're driving him crazy. Now, was this the final act of revenge? That he committed crimes and now he's paying for it? Well, this is where Athena intervenes. She's the goddess of justice. And she's often portrayed as the blindfolded woman holding the scales of justice, the belief in balance of the law. And when Orestes was tried for this act of murder against his father, she intervened and she acquitted him. And she accepted his argument that Apollo had ordered him to kill his mother. But more importantly, in acquitting him, she urged him to be a statesman and a leader who's committed to justice. And to support him, she deployed the Furies, the ones who had been tormenting him, to instead to be the guardians of justice, to give up this idea of justice as vengeance, revenge, and instead to seek higher harmony in society. Now, why bring this up today? Why is this a relevant topic? Well, first of all, the classics are always relevant. That's why they're classics, because they've survived centuries, millennia, because of the stories they tell, which enrich our sense, our internal sense of the beauty of human society, the potential beauty. Now, but why bring it up today? Well, just look at the world. Chaos is afoot worldwide. You might say the Furies have been unleashed worldwide. Wars have replaced diplomacy. Instead of reasonable dialogue, we see rushing into wars with new weapons, with justification that they did this to us and we're not going to let them get away with it, and so on. And you look at the result. Look at what's happening in Ukraine today, where a whole generation has been wiped out. Now, we also see revenge as a justification to respond to previous injustices. For example, the Gaza situation. Remember, the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians did not begin on October 7th. And the idea that somehow the slaughter of Palestinian children is just and is rationalized because of the Palestinian attack on Israeli citizens is a fallback into barbarism. Now we have regime change wars, again in Syria, where we see the Western intelligence agencies aiding and abetting Islamic terrorists who are killing Christians and Druzes and Shiite Muslims in Syria. For what purpose? Who benefits from that? There's no justice there. And you have to then look across to the Eastern Europe, the Republic of Georgia, which is now the target of a regime change war. Now, what's going on is that the little war hawks of the City of London, Wall Street, and Brussels see themselves as gods of Olympus, who can unleash fury at people, unleash chaos. And then what happens? The Furies come out. Now we're seeing this in terms of the collapse of governments all over the world. The people are no longer buying it. The people are angry. They're voting out the incumbents. We see the German government collapsed, followed by the French government. There's chaos now engulfing South Korea, where there's a move to impeach the president there, who is about to implement martial law and had to back off it. Here we see governments acting on behalf of private interests, doing things that go against the interests of the populations. And the populations at a certain point don't like it and they rebel. Now, the question is, why are these collapses taking place in the West? Supposedly, the center of democracy and freedom. Why are governments acting, as the French government just acted, to try and push through a budget without a legislative process? Why are wars being fought? Why are hundreds of billions of dollars being allocated for wars without consent of the governed? So that's why there's an unleashing of the Furies. But the collapse of the Western governments is not due to something that Russia or China or Iran are doing, but the corruption of the oligarchs who run these countries and the willingness, at least until now, of the people to tolerate the corruption. Now, this was the subject of an essay by Lyndon LaRouche. Again, the prescience of LaRouche is just outstanding. This from November 2004, called The Coming Eurasian World, which he essentially wrote as an essay on how to overcome tragedy. And here's what he said. Both the selection of and the relevant failures by that leadership which have been selected are determined by the systemic features of the culture and institutions within which both that selection of leadership and the forces acting upon its behavior are operating. In other words, there's a direct relationship between the corruption of the establishment and the inability of the population to figure it out, which is embedded in the culture, which is imposed by the establishment. And that's why you have to go back to the classics. That's why if you're searching today for who's going to play the role of Athena, the goddess of wisdom, over and above the immediate passions calling for revenge and vengeance and we have a right to this, who's going to play that role? It has to be the citizens. The citizens have to be the vehicles to bring about justice and to bring down the self-obsessed gods of Olympus, or I should say the would-be gods of Olympus. And the citizens have to be the ones who act for justice for all, the guardians of justice. The way the Furies, instead of being allowed to just terrorize those who were guilty, actually became the guardians of the principles of righteousness. And that's what we, the citizens, have to do. Now, that's why the Schiller Institute is having a conference this weekend to bring together what you might call a council of elders, senior officials from governments, from military, from veterans, from various countries from all over the world, to discuss why are we in this crisis and what can be done. And the final panel will be a panel on the cultural question. How do we create a culture which is human, which recognizes that in spite of the differences we have in ethnicity, in cultures, in religion, that all of us, all human beings, have this potential for a higher capability of justice and love. And that's what the Principle of Westphalia is about. And that's what the Schiller Institute is fighting for. So I urge you, use the link in the description section to sign up, organize yourself and your friends and family to join the online conference this Saturday starting at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. This is what we have to do. This is our debt that we have to pay to Aeschylus and those who went before us that created